Hello everyone, thank you for joining. So hello everyone, thank you for joining. I'm going to be joined today by Diala Shamas from the Center for Constitutional Rights and Issam Younis from Almezan Center for Human Rights. I'm just waiting for them to join this live. أهلا وسهلا.
اهلا
يعطيك العافية.
قد يعطيك العافيه. هلا هلا لا اعتقد في مشكله.
I think now we got Diala in the room. All right. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. You can hear me okay?
Yes, can. But I think there's echo because we're in the same room.
We are. This is a problem. I'll be right back. Now that Issam is set up.
All right.
Give me a second.
No. The one that...
So
that's okay.
today we're going to be talking about the ICJ hearings at The Hague. Both Diala and Issam were present at The Hague. They were not inside the courtroom itself, but they were in the court watching in the spillover room. And I know that those of us who are not attorneys, who are not lawyers, a lot of the things we heard seem like gibberish today to us. And I'm doing this conversation in order to translate what this case means. What does it mean that we are at The Hague? What this case means in general? What's the impact? On device, if we can go on mute. Thank you. Great. So the first question is, if you can just give me an idea of why this is, and this is a question for you, Issam, if you can give me an idea of why this case is significant.
Well, I think that how do I view the issue, the new development? It's a breakthrough. It's a historic moment. First, the Palestinian narrative, the Palestinian happened with them, the atrocities, the aggression, the war crime, all the has been widely there by South Africa. So it's important, and we're trying to suppress the Palestinians and speak about their case, what's going on of atrocities and crimes. I think that one thing that the file that was presented and different what was presented in the court by South Africa was and is something important. And second, for is the accountability.
Hold it closer.
Accountability.
Much better.
Accountability was
much better.
Good to hear that. Accountability is a key issue. I mean, why atrocities, crimes, war crimes being committed against Palestinians and protected civilians under international law? Simply because Israel is not accountable. Never been. They feel that they are above the law, never will be subjected to any sort of scrutiny. Imagine to go to a court. So that would consider the issue of accountability, to put it as item one on the international agenda, because Palestinians are dying for justice, for accountability, and I think that's why the court, the ICJ, the new development is quite significant for the two reasons that I think are worth considering.
So basically, it's kind of challenging the status of impunity that Israel has historically enjoyed in the global stage. Diala, I understand, and you can correct me, but I understand this is a big deal. This is a step beyond, if I'm not mistaken, this is a step beyond the 2004 ruling against the wall, or it would be, because this ruling does actually have teeth in some regards. Yani it's not, it is a binding ruling. It's not totally enforceable, but it will have ripple. If the court does rule against Israel in this, it would have ripple effects. Can you explain to me what do these look like?
Yeah, so thanks for having me, Mohammed. It's great to be here with you and Issam. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Good.
Great. Yeah, I think the thing that we're all looking to is South Africa included in its petition a request for preliminary, no, that's the US term. And now I'm blanking, but measures that are in US law, like a sort of a preliminary injunction, precautionary measures, there we go. It's been a long 2 days here. Which would basically, it's asking the court to intervene quickly. Within, in other cases, it's taken the court 2 weeks or 1 week to issue these measures. The first on their list of measures that they've proposed is basically a ceasefire, is basically stopping the military assault on Gaza. So if the court gives, South Africa a version of that request, then states have to act. States have to respect that court decision. It's not an advisory opinion. It's like the equivalent of an injunction. Of course, the problem is we know that states often don't act, and we also know that the ICJ has issued orders that, in the context of Russia and Ukraine, like that Russia has still not abided by. But it does really up the stakes, and then South Africa will, have to and will pursue diplomatic channels, but all states are required to abide by these measures. And so if it means that Israel continues, is in breach of its obligations on, to stop the assault, South Africa will probably need to go to the Security Council. The Security Council will have to say something, and then we're all looking to what the U.S. does, and is the U.S. going to continue to veto this? So it just shifts. Now there's a court ruling by the world's court, which is what the ICJ is. If we get these preliminary measures, and it changes the calculus, and it changes what's at stake, and it's sort of, as the South African Blina, who was the Irish attorney who argued on behalf of South Africa yesterday, an incredible argument, said the sort of legitimacy of the world court and international law hangs in the balance. I mean, if we can't stop a genocide that's unfolding, then what are we here for?
Thank you. That's very informative. Issam, this is you work at Almezan, and this has been your work for many years, because this did not begin or end on October 7th, and we know that the Israeli assault on Palestinian life, incremental genocide even, has been ongoing for many years. What is the significance of having South Africa particularly bring this case forth to the ICJ? I can detest some symbolic significance, but I would love to hear from you. And also, a few people have asked, why didn't the state of Palestine bring forth didn't invoke the Genocide Convention?
Well, definitely, it's quite significant and very symbolic from the side of South Africa, for the history of South Africa in fighting against the apartheid, oppression, and this stuff. So they know exactly what does it mean, the misery of the Palestinians, genocide for the Palestinians. This is on the one hand. The second issue, which I believe is important, I think it's a moment since South Africa and we consider ourselves part of civilized nations, accept what they accept and refuse what they refuse. So one of the manifestations of this civilization that created by civilization is the ICJ, for example, or the ICC. I mean, it was mission impossible to go through the Israeli system, for example, to pursue justice. I mean, for example, me as a director of a human rights organization living in Gaza, we utilize the system. And I think it's the only system with the amendments of the law, state liability law number 8 of 2012, they made it mission impossible for victims to pursue justice. It's the only system that I know ever that a system boycotts the victims. Usually victims boycott the system, claiming that it's biased, unfair. But in the case of Israel vis-a-vis Gazans or vis-a-vis Palestinians, it boycotts the victims. Then where to go? I think such mechanisms, I mean, the ICJ is the most prestigious international court, definitely. So going there, I think we accept what it will decide, since we, or South Africa as well, believes of the independence of the court and very much respect its mandate. So it's the time to look into this, which is genocidal action that has been perpetrated. And the point you raised, I think, is also quite significant to highlight, that genocide is not only being perpetrated during war. It's not the number of people who are being killed. It could be also in peacetime. To destroy a community, ethnic or national or whatever communities, and to destroy its cultural, economic, social life. And it's an ongoing process before the 7th of October. So the 7th of October is not the beginning of history. It's just, I believe, a continuation of what has been perpetrated against the Palestinians, and the fact that those who ordered the perpetration of such acts or crimes or executed them are still enjoy full impunity. So it's quite significant and very symbolic by South Africa. And if the state of Palestine, let me be frank, that I mean, state of Palestine as starting point, if they approach the court or approach different bodies, they will challenge its credibility because they represent the victims per se, because the Palestinians, all the time we have this, even for us as a human rights organizations, when we approach we or Israeli human rights organizations, definitely the Israeli human rights organization is more credible than PCHR or Al-Haq or Almezan.
Right.
The same thing, I believe it's with the state of Palestine. So I mean, South Africa, with all its history and what it represents in the international sphere of fighting for freedom and eliminating apartheid, I think it has a value added in this.
Yeah. It's kind of incredible how Palestinians have been racialized as like non-reliable narrators, even though Israelis have a stake in the game as well. Yani it's not like they're just a neutral party here. What do you think?
Yeah, I was going to jump in on this question of the significance of South Africa, because yes, on the one hand, I actually think it's extra powerful that it's South Africa and not another state that's doing this, right? I mean, think of what South Africa lived through. Think of what the current leadership of South Africa, like what they emerged from. So the people who are filing this petition, on behalf of South Africa, they're not doing it in the name of Palestinians. They're doing it because their understanding of their own international law obligations and their duty to prevent genocide requires them to take all steps within their power, and that includes taking this case to the court. Nevertheless, it's still just like the symbolic and political significance of it being South Africa, that its people have lived through, decades of apartheid. They know exactly what it means to be abandoned by the international community. They know exactly what it means to be called terrorists. They know exactly what it means to be told that your lives don't matter as much as other lives. And they know, and they've fought, and benefited from, and were really part of a kind of global South and anti-decolonial movement. And so I think, for me, watching the hearings yesterday, watching the South African representative open by talking about that longer history, placing it in the context of 75 years of apartheid, brought all of that into the room, and in a way that was more powerful. And just one thing, we were, after the hearing today, after Israel concluded its arguments, There was a bunch of protests outside all day, so much energy in the crowd. I don't know if Issam, you were able to see that after the court. The representatives of the South African government came out and gave a press conference. And there were so many Palestinians. I think people traveled from across Europe to be here, standing outside the court in this historic moment, and the cheers for South Africa, for the South African, leadership that was there giving their press conference were really something to behold. So this is something about the kind of global South really coming together and saying to the West, this is what we're, the international legal order and international law applies to us. Our lives are not worth any less. And we're going to stand also with each other and we're going to do something about it.
So, this has
I
been
hear
on
the
my
echo too.
mind. You can hear me?
Yeah, there's an echo. It might be from me.
This has been on my mind a little bit recently. I don't mean to be a cynic, but growing up in Jerusalem and having to go to Israeli courts, I understood intimately that the law is a lot more political than it has to do with legalities. I wonder how much of this case is a political measure, and what is the political nature of this case. I know that historically ICJ judges have voted overwhelmingly in favor of what best serves their state interests, what best serves their their long-standing foreign policies. And this is a question that's twofold. First of all, I want to understand better what is needed for a verdict to go through, and whether you think this is whether you think this is a politically motivated court.
For me, the question, or
Any
we
of you?
could share it. We
Yes,
could share it.
yeah.
I think, look, all the time, many actors who provide the legal and political cover for the occupying power, trying to politicize different mechanisms, courts, when it comes to the Palestinians. And one could invoke here the case of the ICC, for example, when the court decided to open the investigation in March 2021. Next day, the general prosecutor at that time, Mr. Bensouda, has been retaliated by, at that time, Trump administration by a series of measures. Definitely, pressure is being employed over many in that sphere, not only the ICC, but this case and the ICJ, for example, is not being funded by any of the governments. It's a UN body, so it has its independence and its prestige in that regard. And all members of the United Nations are members of the court and accept its jurisdiction and its rulings in the cases. And for the Palestinians, I think no, it's a place again that these civilized nations, internationally accepted as a mechanism to look into such issues. So it's the time to go through it. The issue is not political. The genocide, for example, it's the mother of crimes, as they say. It's one of, and South Africa, in approaching the court, appealing to the court, submitting its application, it's finally serves its interest, legal and political interest, and contractual interest based on the agreement, the genocide agreement that they are party to. So they are not acting per se on behalf of the Palestinians. I mean, it's not either Palestinian, the PA, or South Africa. No, I think they very respectful nation with the history, with everything, but also when it comes to their rights that derives from the agreement itself. They approach the court to say a word on this. Since a third party is violating the convention or the agreement, and I think it's not political. Others trying to politicize that. And when it comes to this genocide fact on the ground in Palestine. We thought, to be honest, and I come from Gaza, and I was during the war there,
You just left,
recently
yeah.
just evacuated from there. We thought that we could agree on still some basic principles. To discover that even the basic principles we do not agree with. I mean, others do not agree with us. Otherwise, a ceasefire could be adopted in the Security Council. So, stop the killings of children. I think still something being debated. Imagine this, or destruction of a hospital or a nursery still being debated. So, I think it's a moment of a truth. It's pure legal, pure humanitarian. That let the court say a word on this. And if we have, I mean, because as you know, it's a kind of when it comes to this convention on genocide, it's of two layers obligations, obligation of conduct. I mean, to stop the genocide and to take provisional measures, but also those who ordered or perpetrated could also be sued and brought to justice. So we are now obsessed, all Palestinians, because time in Gaza and Palestine in general is being counted by the number of children being killed in the second. So time is a very important factor. That's why we will still trust the court, the independence of the court. We do not view it to be political. It's pure justice, and that's our demand all the time.
Do you
International
share?
law, rule of law. If it's not the rule of law, then it's the rule of the jungles. And we still believe there is a room, even it's getting narrow and narrow for the rule of law, but we still believe and back the rule of law because we are part of the, as I said, civilized nations that accepted such a thing.
Thank you. Do you share the view, Diala?
I think that we all know that courts are not our saviors. Courts aren't where we're going to find liberation. Courts are not how we end colonial rules, not how apartheid ended. I still think that they also have a role, and they can have a role, and the role that they have depends on what we make of it, right? So Palestinians and South Africans and other states are all agents, and I think the political significance of what South Africa did was huge because it's also signaling, by bringing this petition, it's signaling that there will be efforts for accountability. I think on the legal merits, it's clear cut. I also think that there's a high likelihood of getting the preliminary measures, and then the question is what can the precautionary measures. I keep mixing U.S. law and international law. But I think that we might get those measures, and then ultimately it's going to be up to all of us, the Palestine movement, the Palestine Solidarity Movement, and states to make sure that there's implementation. And that's a political battle. That's not ultimately a legal battle. And that's really when we say like what's hanging in the balance is like the very basis like of international law. It also is like the rule of law and morality that's hanging in the balance. So yes, as I'm a lawyer, I use the courts as best we can in pursuit of, social justice and freedom movements. And we also know that we're not working in isolation. I think everybody understands that. The people outside the court today weren't protesting knowing that khalas, it's in the hand of the ICJ now and we're going to see a liberated Palestine. Nobody believes that. But I think it's an important site of struggle, and it shifted the focus to where it needs to be. I mean, yesterday we had South African lawyers lay out the Palestinian experience and the Palestinian narrative for the world's eyes, uninterrupted for once. And I think we were all moved to see it. And we were moved to see Irish lawyers argue it. We were moved to see South African lawyers argue it. We were moved to see the Israeli legal team have to sit there and listen because they probably, frankly, if they're consuming Israeli news, not even heard some of these things. So there's significance.
So I wanna follow up with a follow-up question. طيب, this this is you're saying practically that the court is not divorced from the street. Some people argue that the United Nations resolutions or the ICJ or the ICC and things like this are what some people call safety valve. Basically, you allow people to let off some steam so that they are not in the streets rioting and protesting and so on. But what you're saying is that the battle is not solely in the court, and so let's say the the court does issue a verdict and it does favor South Africa, then the challenge becomes translating that and putting pressure on states to follow this verdict. What is for those of us who don't understand the law or how these things operate beyond just like looking at the silly wigs that these people are wearing, what is next? Like so there were two hearings today and yesterday. What's the rest of the process look like?
So briefly, my understanding, and Issam, feel free to add, is we will hopefully soon hear from the court when it intends to issue its decision on I keep forgetting the word, provisional measures. And then again, we hope it's within weeks or 1 week. And then from there, the court will make a decision on what provisional measures. It's, ideally, it's all of the ones that South Africa has requested, but it's probably going to be some subset. And I think from there, there's states have to respond. I'm not entirely sure what that response immediately looks like, but I do think it's going to be an intensive diplomatic process also. And then the court, the case still lives on. So the genocide, so this is like the sort of call it the temporary decision to stop, but then the claim of genocide and whether it's occurring, like what we call it, the merit stage, will still proceed. So the case doesn't really die. Although the Israeli team today requested that the court not only not grant any of the measures, but also that it just end the case to core, so doesn't let it proceed.
If you allow me, Mohammed, just to comment on the broader issue of justice and the value of approaching the court or the different UN resolutions or this engagement with the different bodies. I mean, Palestinians since 48 until today, they have thousands and thousands of resolutions from different UN agencies, the Security Council, General Assembly, or Human Rights Council, and now the ICJ. We have an advisor even in 2004, and I remember saying, I hope that I quoted and translated properly from Arabic to English to one of the landmark scholars in law, Sanhuri. He said that law controls relations between two strongs or two weaks. When it comes to occupier vis-a-vis occupied, I mean, the occupied is all the time pushing for justice and law, international law, and the other, the oppressor, definitely doesn't accept the rules of the game that accepted. And for us, justice to be put in that context, that it's cannot be achieved in one blow. Justice only be achieved through systematic work, through scoring points and accumulating those points in a very long way, and costly, definitely is costly, but it's the only way for Palestinians to pursue justice in this very tough and context where, as I said, many would provide the legal and political cover for the atrocities if they have been perpetrated in different geographies. Then I mean the whole engagement will be different. But finally, it's international law and obligations, and I think it's ongoing process. And the only way for us to make our case clear is to utilize international law. We are on the right side of history, and I believe the more we gain or engage more with different manifestations of the international community, I think the more we reposition our case, the denial of justice in this very tough, if you like, globe, very tough geopolitique, very tough relation south north. I think that's why we are expecting the court to take measures, but I mean, finally, it doesn't have its teeth to implement its definitely its rulings. But then it's another point to be recorded, and I think it has very, very significant moral and legal impact and value. And life will not be as used to be, that Palestinians victims, but they are not here victims, and trying to dehumanize them all the time. I think it's a moment of truth where I think things to reposition in the right direction.
Thank you. This is very illuminating, and I agree that the world is not going to be the same. I know we have to. I just want to ask you, Diala, was just one more question before we end. I know we're short on time, but lots of people have been asking whether a positive verdict could mean that people like Blinken and Rishi Sunak and all of these world leaders that have aided and abetted genocide will face consequences, and whether you can share with us. I know CCR has also been doing lots of work around genocide, not only this, but in general. I think there are other avenues that CCR has been exploring alongside other legal institutions in the United States and elsewhere. So if you can just put us up to speed on all the different avenues, or the avenues that we're using.
Yeah, so I think one important distinction is the International Court of Justice, which is sort of adjudicating different state disputes, and then the International Criminal Court and criminal proceedings. So a lot of times when we talk about accountability, we're talking about criminal accountability, and that's not an issue in this case, but the ICC should certainly be looking to what the ICJ does, and should also be investigating every war criminal involved. And I'm not just talking about the foot soldiers in Gaza, but the command, right? And has the ability to, of course, charge people, issue arrest warrants for genocide, as well as war crimes, as well as a whole bunch of crimes. And Issam and many other Palestinian organizations have been for years, and I'm just a newcomer to this, pushing for that kind of a criminal investigation. There's no shortage of evidence, there's no shortage of dossiers, right? Since October 7th, there's even more, and so that's the ICC point. And then different states have something called universal jurisdiction, and have the ability to pursue criminally either Israeli officials or officials in their own states for aiding and abetting or other forms of complicity in genocide. Our case in the U.S., we filed a lawsuit relatively early on in the process in November, in a U.S. federal court, trying to get an injunction, an emergency, or what I've been saying, preliminary injunction this whole time on this live. It's because that's on my mind. So we sued Biden, Blinken, and Austin, who's the Secretary of Defense, for complicity in genocide and for their failure in their duty to prevent genocide under U.S. law. I mean, we the international law is like sort of incorporated in U.S. law. So that case is ongoing. We're asking the court to order that the injunction that we're asking the court to give us is to stop military assistance to Israel. Now, we of course know that the biggest supporter of the Israeli, genocidal assault has been the U.S. down to the T, like its weapons, it's repeatedly vetoing resolutions for ceasefire, full diplomatic cover and support. And I think today even there was news that they were actually, their intelligence officers were helping identify targets. So this is like real hand-in-hand, close collaboration, which they've been boasting about. So we brought this lawsuit, and it's on a relatively expedited timeline, and we're going to be in court on the 26th of January. So that's in like 2 weeks, basically, in federal court arguing that case. So the U.S. government's going to stand up in court, and if the ICJ says something between now and then, it'll be really interesting to see whether they continue their posture, or what tone they set. I think it'll be one of the early tests of that. So the two cases are interacting. They're like not formally related, but obviously it's the same claims as genocide. We're going after the U.S. complicity in genocide, and at the ICJ, it's Israel directly that's on trial.
Tayyip, thank you. I don't want to take more of your time. Thank you both. Especially Issam, I know you haven't done Instagram live
It's
before,
my
I
first
think, so I really, really
time.
appreciate you. I really appreciate you making the time, and I appreciate you, Diala, for all of the insight. This has certainly been illuminating, and I want to remind people as we exit that the bombs have not stopped and the war has not stopped, and Israel is still assaulting the Gaza Strip. And so, as we watch this court, unfold, we must also be taking to the streets, and we must also be as loud as possible. Again, thank you so much,
100%.
and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mohammed. Thanks, Issam.
so much, Mohammed, for the invitation and for the time, and thank you, Diala. Thank you so much. Good luck.
Yeah. Bye.